love,
tenderness,
the love of God,
unity,
a symbol of Cuban identity.
the mother of the Cuban people. She is it.
"This is the most beautiful land ever seen by human eyes," wrote Christopher Columbus in his logbook on the 28th of October 1492, on disembarking at Bariai Bay and setting foot on Cuban land for the first time. Nowadays, the Cuban archipelago, made up of the island of Cuba, the Isla de la Juventud, Isle of Youth, and over 4,000 cays and small islets, has around 11 million inhabitants. Ernest Hemingway, the author of well-known works such as The Old Man and the Sea or The Sun Also Rises, received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1954. Hemingway wanted to dedicate this prize to the Cuban people who he loved so much. He decided that the best way to do this was to offer the prize to Our Lady of Charity of El Cobre, as she was the symbol of Cubanía or Cubanness. Hemingway knew well what he was doing. To tell the story of Cuba of the last 400 years is to tell the story of devotion to Our Lady of Charity of El Cobre. For any Cuban to say Our Lady of Charity is to say Nation and Motherland. They call her the Mambisa, as she was invoked by the Mambises soldiers during the Wars of Independence. And they call her Cachita, an affectionate diminutive for caridad, charity. The history of this devotion originates from the northeast of the island, specifically in Nipe Bay, which is currently in the Holguin province. There, 2 Indian brothers and a black boy of 9 or 10 years of age went looking for salt.
Estrella de la mañana, que brilló sobre las aguas, a los 3 de Barajagua, que iban remando con ganas. Su aventura no fue vana, pues la sal que los movía, en sal y amor cambiaría. Al ver en Nipe en el mar aquella imagen flotar de la caridad María.
En la zona norte de lo que es el actual territorio holguinero.
2 events have taken place in the northern area, which is currently the Holguin province, which make it important, because the port of Bariai, on our coastline, which is where Christopher Columbus entered Cuba in 1492, and a little to the east is Nipe Bay, which is where the statue of Our Lady of Charity was discovered in 1612.
Fue el hallazgo de la imagen de la Virgen de la Caridad.
In 1971, the Cuban historian Levi Marrero discovered the oldest document to pay testament to this discovery in the Spanish archive of the Indies. The account given years later by the king's slave Juan Moreno, one of the protagonists of the event. A copy of that document is kept in the Archbishopric of Santiago de Cuba.
Este es el legajo que contiene los documentos.
This is the file which contains the documents regarding the parish church and the El Cobre shrine. One of them is very important. It is a copy of a document which details the sworn statements taken almost 80 years after the appearance of the Virgin in Nipe. These statements include the main interview of the black slave Juan Moreno when he was an elderly man, where he tells the story of what happened to them and what they discovered during that period when he was still a child.
La historia dice que después de traerla
The story goes that after bringing her to the Barajagua cattle ranch, a temple was built for her, and she remained there for 2 years. After 2 years, it was decided to take her to the mines of El Cobre, and it was therefore here, in this area, where the devotion and presence of the statue took root among us. Perhaps because I'm the Bishop of Holguin, my reading of the discovery is sentimental and spiritual, because when one reads the Gospel according to St. John at the cross, he says to him, "Woman, behold thy son. Son, behold thy mother." The Gospel says, "And the disciple took her into his home." Then when those 3 salters see that small statue, and Juan Moreno takes it from the sea and puts it in the boat and brings it home, that home is Cuba.
traerla a esa casa que es Cuba.
If you follow the slave route, which was the name also given to the royal road which connects Barajagua to Santiago de Cuba, you arrive at the royal mining village of Santiago del Prado, which is commonly known as the village of El Cobre, copper, as this is the material which was extracted from the mines located there. The town is 4 leagues from Santiago de Cuba, and as early as the 17th century, several hundred slaves, Hispanic and indigenous people, were concentrated there.
Ya estaban aquí los indios de siempre.
The Indians were already here, as were the slaves, and those 2 Indians and a young slave found the Virgin there. And so that no one is left out, the governor of the mine who decided to bring her here was a Spaniard. And I said, what a coincidence. It was when the 3 ethnic groups which shaped our nation were present that the Virgin arrived.
Configurado nuestra nacionalidad fue que vino la Virgen.
The devotion of the 3 ethnic groups to the statue has meant that Our Lady of Charity of El Cobre has always been venerated by all of the island's inhabitants, making her a symbol of Cubanía.
Bueno, Cubanía es todo aquello que permite identificar.
Cubanía is everything that makes it possible to identify a person from this land. Cubanness is linked to the formation process of that identity over the centuries, starting with the arrival of the Hispanic Castilian colonists and continuing with the mixing or the cultural and ethnic miscegenation process between the indigenous people and the Africans. The word Cuban encompasses all of those self-defining mixtures which originate from Africa and the indigenous people alike, and where there is a prevailing Hispanic cultural element resulting from their conquest of this land. That is what we can call Cubanía.
While a shrine was being built to venerate it, the statue was being kept in the chapel of the hospital for slaves on the Mine Hill. It was those same royal slaves who, together with the other residents of Santiago del Prado, constructed the first temple at the end of the 17th century. However, the shrine and the hostel collapsed in 1906 as a result of the heavy mining activities below the building, which were carried out by the American company the Cobre Mines. The statue had to be moved to the village's parish church until 1927, when the Archbishop Monsignor Subisarreta consecrated the new shrine, which was constructed using donations from all around the island. The devotion to Our Lady of Charity not only took root in the areas of Holguin and Santiago. It soon spread from one end of the island to the other, and across a wide variety of sections of the population, above all among the Creoles, and among peasants and the poorer groups. From the very beginning, Our Lady of Charity of El Cobre was to be particularly associated with the history of those who suffer most in Cuba. It was there, at the foot of the Hermitage, that in 1801 the Royal Charter was read, which granted freedom to the mining slaves, with the encouragement of the chaplain Alejandro Ascanio. And it would also be there, at the shrine of El Cobre, where, on the 8th of September 1898, General Calixto Garcia, commander of the Eastern Army, sent his general staff to attend a Thanksgiving Mass, which was held at the foot of the statue of Our Lady of Charity of El Cobre, for having won independence for Cuba.
En Cuba, cualquier persona que vea a la Virgen de la Caridad enseguida le recuerda a Cuba.
In Cuba, anybody who sees Our Lady of Charity is instantly reminded of Cuba. We can see this with the Cubans across the entire world, who, one way or another, are reminded of the motherland by the Virgin. This memory is evoked in a very special way because when people go to El Cobre and pray to the Virgin, they are each accompanied not only by their own joys and sorrows to be presented to God through the Virgin, but also by those of their families and those of Cuba in general.
Traen sus alegrías y sus penas, sino también la de su familia y de manera general la de toda Cuba. Por eso llama la atención a los extranjeros cuando entran en nuestras iglesias.
Foreigners' attention is drawn when they enter our churches and see the Cuban flag next to Our Lady of Charity. They are almost inseparable, and therefore during our celebrations of the feast day of Our Lady, we also sing the national anthem and the flag is present. People are reminded of her because in her they see a kind and merciful hand. Believers see the power of God which can do good things for our land. And when people go to El Cobre, I think that most of the time, if not all of them, I would not like to be mistaken, ask for the best for Cuba.
No quisiera equivocarme, creo que en toda la totalidad de los que van al Cobre.
In 1916, Pope Benedict XV officially proclaimed Our Lady of Charity of El Cobre to be the patroness of the Republic of Cuba, in response to the request made by the veterans of the War of Independence and the people of Cuba. Some years before, the Dominican Paulino Alvarez had already written, Our Lady of Charity of El Cobre will be the official patroness of Cuba, so that charity reigns in Cuba. Because without charity, there is no union. Without union, there is no peace. Without peace, life is death.
La salve es muy bonita cuando dice,
The Salve Regina is splendid when it says, "Turn thine eyes of mercy towards me." People know that the Virgin is the Mother of Mercy, and the people saw it 400 years ago, and they are seeing it today. In other words, people place all of that expression of suffering, of pain, of frustrated aspirations, of hopes that were never achieved, with Mary, trusting that if they are not to be resolved, they will have the capacity for acceptance, healthy acceptance.
la capacidad de la aceptación, de la sana aceptación.
In 1959, the revolution, which still had a popular and purely Cuban character, triumphed against the dictator, Fulgencio Batista. In November of that very year, the National Catholic Congress was held in Havana, with the presence of over 1 million Cubans and Fidel Castro. The Statue of Charity was brought from El Cobre to the capital to once again place past sorrows and suffering at the feet of the patroness of Cuba, but also to pray for the future of a country which was again starting to be torn apart under the shadow of another totalitarian system. On September 10, 1961, the revolutionary government prohibited the traditional procession of the Charity of El Cobre in Havana a few hours before it was due to start, resulting in riots ending in one death and the expulsion of 130 priests and Monsignor Eduardo Boza, the auxiliary bishop of Havana. This was the start of a period of great difficulties and suffering for the church. However, the devotion to the Charity of El Cobre has remained unshakable.
Y eso me hace preguntarme, es decir, después de todas las cosas que han pasado.
That makes me wonder, after all the things that have happened, after 50-something years of Marxist-Leninist revolution, after so much marching, searching, the people of this nation, for me, it is inexplicable that the Virgin maintains, and she clearly does, a very unique relationship with these people. These people that no longer have the catechesis that they had before, that no longer have the missions that they had before, that no longer have the public resources with which it was possible before for the Church to approach the people and keep their faith and knowledge of the Virgin alive. But the fact is that it is there. Perhaps it has even grown.
All of the ex-votos kept in the shrine bear witness to this centuries-old devotion.
Since the old days, when I came here as a child, there were what we called ex-votos, which are those pieces of silver you can see hanging on the shelves of the walls. And that small silver, or sometimes gold, ex-voto, is intended to express gratitude to the Virgin for having recovered one's health. It was always like this, you know, because silver could be obtained. But as silver became harder to come by, people sought other ways of expressing their gratitude to the Virgin. And in that way, without knowing why originally, perhaps because silver was hard to get or because of the sacrifice involved in paying for it, people began to bring other objects, as dissimilar as you can possibly imagine.
An important, decisive step for the Church in Cuba was the visit of Pope John Paul II in January 1998.
It was something necessary that the people needed and that the Church needed. In other words, the party had been working very well for 30 years to attempt, as our Marxist brothers put it, to wipe out the Catholic faith of the Church. They joined forces with whoever they could, and they did a very good job. Faith languished. It languished, but it lived on in the Cuban people. And we saw that. And we and the Cuban people needed to receive confirmation in faith.
Siempre el amor, siembra siempre el amor, siembra siempre el amor, madre del pueblo, siembra el amor.
John Paul II crowned the statue as Queen and Patroness of Cuba during Holy Mass in Santiago de Cuba.
Se juran fidelidad, mas cuesta mucho.
Santiago de Cuba tiene aproximadamente 500,000 y un poquito más de habitantes.
Santiago has approximately 500,000 inhabitants. And, if I may say so, I would say that that exact number were there in that square, which was a square which was made for large gatherings. It was the first time that such a gathering had taken place, because it was still being finished. The day arrived, and the people were there, without anyone calling them other than the Catholic Church, and with me personally requesting that they not attend for any other reason than to see the Pope. This was the first and only time I have spoken on the radio during my 43 years as a bishop, that day. And the people, despite not having a very clear idea about things, the Eucharist had not been celebrated publicly for years, many years. That was the first time in over 40 or 50 years. Holy Father, for years these people have defended the sovereignty of their geographical borders with true dignity. But to some extent we have forgotten that independence must build on the sovereignty of the individual, who sustains each project we undertake as a nation from beneath.
Que sostiene desde abajo todo proyecto como nación.
Es la única vez que he tenido la posibilidad.
It is the only time that I have had the opportunity, in 43 years as a bishop, and in all conscience I saw that I had to say what had to be said, which was to describe the reality of what our people were experiencing and had experienced during all of those years. And the Lord and Our Lady allowed me to do it.
El Señor y la Virgen me permitieron hacerlo.
Because of the characteristics of this devotion, Our Lady of Charity of El Cobre has become a symbol of hope for the future of Cuba. A future where the words union and reconciliation must be written in capital letters.
Our Lady of Charity of El Cobre has had a political value throughout the history of Cuba. During the struggle of the miners, and then with her protecting role during the War of Independence, as a symbolic element of the unity of Cubans during their struggle. It seems to me that whenever there has been a political situation of peace or conflict, Our Lady of Charity has appeared to unite people.
Today, many would like the Virgin, as the Mother, to be the one capable of uniting us all. Cubans who are on the island, Cubans who are away from the island, Cubans who think in one way, Cubans who think in another, Cubans who walked the Christian path and stopped walking, and are returning today, or those who have their own individual way of thinking and acting. But Mary, Mary of the Charity, can bring Cuba together as a family.
Life has often been compared to a long pilgrimage, which is not free of obstacles and difficulties. Mary of the Charity of El Cobre has been, is, and will be a guide and mother to the Cubans on this journey.
Así que la Virgen lo que está enseñando al pueblo cubano es.
What the Virgin is showing the Cuban people is her Son, and that there is no way of going to her Son without passing by the cross, which nobody wants. And these people are now experiencing what it means to pass by this cross. This is why they understand each other so well, Maria and the Cuban people. Because the salvation of these lives lies in her Son, in nothing else, not in a system or ideology, but in the Son of God and the Virgin Mary. And the cross is the path.
Camino viejo del cobre, marchan buen hombre buscando a la caridad. Por el camino viejo del cobre, marchan buen hombre buscando a la caridad.
Me retiro, Virgen buena, pero no me marcho solo. Tu imagen vive en mis ojos y la fe en mi corazón. Tu imagen vive en mis ojos y la fe en mi corazón. Ya tú ves.
Por el camino viejo del